everyone, welcome back to Talking History. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you're all keeping well. My name's Liz, and on this channel I do exactly as it is called, I talk about history. Before we get into today's video, I just want to say a really big thank you to those who have left some really lovely comments on one of my videos. I think it was Edward, and it was so lovely to read, and it really gave me a confidence boost. And it's so nice to know that you're enjoying my content. As I said, I'm not a historian, I'm just someone who loves history, and I'm so glad that there's people out there who's enjoying it. So thank you so much, and I really hope you continue watching and enjoying the content. So if you're new here, I am very new. I think I've only got 10 videos maybe now, so I do hope you go back and watch some of the older videos, and I do hope that you like and subscribe so you don't miss a single video as I upload every single week. So enough blabbing, let's get into today's video, which is Edward the Martyr. I feel like I'm saying Edward the Martyr. No, Edward the Martyr. King Edward, who would become known as Edward the Martyr, was born around 962, and he was the eldest son born to King Edgar the Peaceful and his first wife, Ethelfled. And even though Edward was the firstborn, Edgar hadn't acknowledged Edward as his future rightful heir to the throne, as Edgar at this point had remarried. He had remarried to Althwith, and they had settled and they had children of their own, and they had sons, one which included Ethelred, who would become known as Ethelred the Unready. But Althwith obviously was, she was actually one of the first queens to be acknowledged as Queen Regent and actually have a coronation. But both sons had a valid claim to the throne. Edgar died in 975, and almost immediately there was a family dispute over power, and that led to unimaginable turn of events, which still to this day is shrouded in mystery. Edward was only 13 when his father died, and Edward's legitimacy was called into question as Edgar had never acknowledged him as his rightful heir. There was a dispute by those who had supported his younger half-brother, Ethelred, wanted him to rule instead. But even though Ethelred was, he was undisputably a right and no legitimate claim to the throne, there's no doubt in that at all, but he was only 6 or 7 years old when his father passed away, and this made the more logical choice for his brother, older half-brother, to become king. Either way, as I said, both were still very young. Ethelred was only 6 or 7, Edward was only 13. And unfortunately, they were both being used as pawns by those in court who was bidding for either of their power. And in the case of Ethelred, his mother, Althwith, she was keen to get her son on the throne. Eventually, Edward was chosen to be the next King of England, and he was crowned by the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was Bishop Dunstan, who had represented Edward. He had backed Edward. And he also had the support of Oswald of Worcester, who was Archbishop of York. Edward was chosen as king, but there's very little known about his character. As I said, he was only 13. So there's no definite what kind of boy he was, what he liked, what his ability to lead was. At the time, there are two very different accounts that paint a very different picture to his character. According to Brythworth, who was a priest based at Ramsey Abbey, he had recorded that Edward was bad-tempered, and it affected the men who worked closely with him, and it caused an atmosphere of fear and unease and unsteadiness. Whereas on another account by Osborne of Canterbury, he reported that Edward he commanded well. He held his men in high regard, and the men held him in high regard. But these two very different accounts of his character only contribute to the mystery of the young king and his very short reign. Edward's ascension to the throne was taken place during a massive power struggle, and his reign did nothing to calm the fears of treachery and violence and disorder. During his short 3-year reign, the so-called anti-monastic reaction had taken place. So back in Edgar's reign, as I said in his video, he had put a lot of money and lands into rebuilding the monasteries, and this had upset a lot of the nobles and all the landowners who lost land because he built all the monasteries. So the landowners basically, and all the nobility who was against Edgar's plans of building all the monasteries, they found they found him weak, so they took advantage of his weakness. So they found it was a perfect time to seize control, and this had led to attacks on the monasteries and the properties that belonged to the church. The landowners increased their attacks, especially in the north, which was compounded by further political issues pertaining to the opposition of the southern rule. It's just constant, isn't it? It's just constant, ongoing. Some of the greatest ranking nobles, such as Alfhere and Ethelwine, had found themselves embroiled in conflict, and Alfhere was portrayed as one of the main leaders of the anti-monastic movement. The dispute escalated quickly, and civil war was looking really likely, and Edward's leadership was not strong enough to deal with the offence, even with the help of the powerful Dunstan behind him. The dispute over the monastery estates continued, and Edward's reign was in constant crisis. In March, on the 18th of March in 978, Edward, he made the decision that he wanted to go and visit his half-brother, Ethelred, at Corfe Castle. So Edward arrived in the evening, and he was accompanied by only a small group of men, and they were all met at the gates, which was perfectly normal for this time. And according to the chronicles, the members of the household were alerted to Edward's impending arrival, again, which was normal. So Edward would have been expecting a warm welcome when he arrived, and get accompanied into the castle and have a lovely chat with his brother and maybe see his stepmother. But on this particular evening, that wouldn't happen. What was to happen next has been shrouding it in secrecy and cryptic accounts. As the 16-year-old Edward waited to be allowed entry at the castle gates, perhaps being offered a drink of mead to quench his thirst after such a long journey, whilst he waited, Edward was still mounted on his horse, and he was mercifully stabbed. His horse bolted, and Edward was still, as I said, still mounted on his horse, and his foot got caught in the stirrup, and his body was dragged along the ground when the horse bolted into the night. No one really knows how the offence had actually played out. However, what was perfectly clear was that murder and treachery had been committed on that night. And that would go on to have enormous repercussions, not only for the throne, but also for the kingdom and for Christianity for the next years to come. One of the main source of the period, and in particular this event, is the Anglo Saxon chronicles. And in particular, the Peterborough Chronicle manuscript that describes the tragic events on the 18th of March in 978. Men murdered him, but God exalted him. In life, he was an earthly king. After death, he is now a heavenly saint. One of the most likely suspects of Edward's assassination was said to have been on the orders of his stepmother, Althwith. She had intended to put her own son, Ethelred, on the throne. And there's also some who said, Ethelred could have done it. Don't be a plonker, come on. Ethelred was far too young to have orchestrated such a devious event. There was another possible key figure for Edward's murder, and that was Alfhere, who was Alderman of Mercia, and as I said, one of the main conspirators against the anti-monastic. Alfhere was later involved in Edward's reburial, and some had seen this as a display of penance for Edward's murder. Whoever was responsible for Edward's murder remains a source of intrigue that had power, politics, and wealth all at play. Perhaps the only other time that such intrigue and mystery was with the sudden disappearance of the princes in the tower. That was some 500 years later. Edward's body was placed in a grave near Wareham, and without any ceremony expected of a royal burial. A year later, his body was disinterred and taken to Shaftesbury Abbey, where he received a proper ceremony and was then placed in prominent position in the abbey in 1001, as by this point he was now considered a saint. Edward would go on to become known as Edward the Martyr, and this was a representation of an innocent victim slain for power and prestige. His martyrdom status was secured by his untimely death. However, his status as a saint was endured by the miracles that were said to have miraculously occurred at his tomb. His remains were said to have been completely intact, and this was a sign of his sainthood. His veneration followed, and to this day, Edward the Martyr's feast day is celebrated on the 18th of March, the day of his mortal demise. During the dissolution of the monasteries, the bones were removed from their resting place and they were hidden. Then in 1931, bones were discovered in the ruins of the abbey, and they were said to have been Edward's. Today, the bones lay in the Orthodox Church of the St. Edward the Martyr in Brookwood, Surrey. Till this day, many from the Roman Catholic Church, the Anglican Communion and the Eastern Orthodox Church recognise and celebrate his glorified sainthood from 1001. Ethelred would go on to succeed Edward, where he would become one of the longest reigning monarchs from the Anglo Saxon period, and he would become known as Ethelred the Unready. And that video will be coming very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all again soon. Look after yourselves. Take care. Bye.